reasons, among many, that I am an atheist. Have you ever noticed that most people are the religion of their parents? You'd think that if there was one super obvious religion, then everyone would have converted to that by now, but instead most people are the religion that their parents are affiliated with. If there is a God, then he must be a really horrible person. It's not uncommon to hear believers say, "Oh, God saved my baby, what a miracle," even though that same God is completely ignoring all of the babies dying in extreme poverty across the world. It seems to me like God favors those who already live in affluent societies who have access to great medical care. But if you bring this up to believers, they'll say some nonsense about how God has to test some people. There's also just no evidence that God exists, and sure, I've heard tons of personal anecdotes about miracles and seeing things that couldn't be explained, but to me, every time I hear a story like that, there's always a more logical explanation for the phenomenon. Some say the human body is evidence that God exists, but it's riddled with design issues. We get addicted easily, our eyes are too weak, we need surgery constantly, and before modern medicine, women died in childbirth all the time.
Well, now these comments by this young woman are thoughtful, I think, and deserve a serious response. She presents three arguments in favor of atheism. Now, the third of these, I think, is the most important, but also the most vulnerable, and that is that there's no evidence for the existence of God. And here I think it's very evident that she's simply not informed very well about the arguments for God's existence. She doesn't seem to have any understanding of things like the cosmological argument, the teleological argument from fine-tuning, the moral argument, the ontological argument. Instead, she appeals to purported miracles or strange phenomena that people have seen. And I would encourage her, therefore, to take a look at and interact with some of these arguments for God's existence. I've defended at least 6 such arguments that I think constitute a powerful cumulative case that God does exist. These are available on our website, reasonablefaith.org, or if she prefers to look at videos, I'd invite her to watch some of the videos that I've had of debates with atheists, like Christopher Hitchens and others, and see which way the evidence points. Now, as I say, this is the most important of her 3 points, because if, in fact, there is good evidence for God's existence, then her other 2 points just become difficult questions, just perplexities, but not really proofs that God doesn't exist. For example, she says that most people adopt the religion of the society in which they were raised. Well, that's certainly true, but this isn't an argument for atheism. At the very best, this would be some sort of argument for inclusivism or accessibilism, that the knowledge of God is accessible in various religions throughout the world. And that's an internal debate among theists, the degree to which salvation or the knowledge of God is accessible in different religions. It's not an argument for atheism. She's just made a category mistake. Now, with respect to someone being grateful that their baby was spared in an accident, I've always found this to be a rather odd sort of complaint by non-believers. If your baby alone was spared and it was God's will that the other babies die, shouldn't you be grateful? Why would you not be grateful that he spared your child, even though the others were taken? It seems to me that a response of gratitude is entirely appropriate. Now, of course, if she's thinking that the sparing of your child is meant to be evidence for God's existence, then she's quite right. That wouldn't be a very good argument for God's existence, but that's not the way it's intended. Instead, this is meant to be an expression of one's gratitude that one's child was saved. Now, if she's simply talking about the problem of suffering and evil, well, that is a perennial question. And here I think the atheist faces a real difficulty. Namely, she would have to prove that the suffering in the world is either impossible or highly improbable given God's existence. And that places a burden of proof on the atheist's shoulder that is so heavy that no atheist has ever been able to bear it. And this is especially relevant if there is good evidence for God's existence. If we have good reasons to believe that God exists, then it isn't all that surprising that we shouldn't discern the reasons for which he permits each and every instance of suffering in the world. Rather, we can trust him and his goodness because we have good reason to believe in the existence of God. So I don't think she's done a very good job of providing a positive argument for atheism. At most, she's just left us with some tough questions to ponder, but those questions themselves don't provide any reason for thinking that God doesn't exist.